This CEO treated his driver like garbage, but what happened next will shock you. What started as a day full of arrogance and humiliation turned into a life-changing moment for both of them. You won't believe how a simple act of kindness turned everything upside down. In the world of high-powered CEOs, arrogance often becomes a byproduct of success. At the top, the illusion of control and superiority over everyone else can cloud judgment. This CEO was no exception. He ran a multi-million-dollar company, making deals and decisions that affected thousands of lives. His days were filled with meetings, press conferences, and endless emails, all while sitting in his high-rise office overlooking the city he dominated. He had everything: wealth, status, and an army of employees to manage his empire. But there was one thing he lacked: respect for the people who worked for him. The CEO's attitude toward his staff, especially his driver, Michael, was a reflection of his blind arrogance. He viewed those who served him as nothing more than tools to maintain his lifestyle, never acknowledging their humanity. "I don't have time for people like you," he would often say, dismissing anyone who wasn't part of his inner circle. His chauffeur, Michael, was no exception. Michael had been driving the CEO for years, yet the CEO never bothered to learn his name or even recognize his hard work. It was a silent, daily routine. Michael would arrive at the CEO's penthouse, open the door, and drive him to meetings. Their interactions were always brief, always professional, but never personal. Michael was a man of quiet dignity. He didn't complain about the CEO's dismissive behavior. In fact, he had learned to just accept it. After all, this was the world they lived in. The CEO had power, and people like Michael were supposed to serve. It wasn't personal, it was just business. But this relationship wasn't without its toll. Michael had been working as a driver for over 15 years, and in all that time, he had never once been invited inside the CEO's office. He'd seen the CEO's lavish lifestyle from the outside, but he was always kept at arm's length, an invisible presence. The CEO's attitude was not just a small personal flaw. It was a symptom of the larger corporate culture that valued power, control, and money over human connection. The CEO's employees were just cogs in the machine, easily replaceable, and there to serve his needs. This belief was reinforced every time Michael was treated like an afterthought, an invisible figure who was expected to chauffeur him without question. But on this particular day, something was different. It was the beginning of another typical workday, and the CEO was running late for an important meeting. As usual, Michael was there, ready to drive him. But something about the CEO's behavior seemed different this time. His usual aloofness had been replaced by impatience, and he was visibly agitated. "Michael, you're late," the CEO snapped as soon as he stepped into the car. The CEO never really cared about the punctuality of others, but today it seemed that he was more irritable than usual. Perhaps it was the stress of his job or the pressure of the upcoming meeting, but his frustration had clearly reached a boiling point. He made a mental note to add another complaint to Michael's file. It was a small thing, but it gave him a sense of control in a world where he felt like everything else was slipping away. Michael, as always, remained calm and composed. He didn't argue or retaliate. Instead, he simply nodded and started the car. However, the tension in the air was thick. The CEO's insults had become routine, but they had begun to wear on Michael. He'd been humiliated in small ways for years, but something about today felt different. As the car sped down the road, the CEO continued to make cutting remarks, mostly about how Michael's driving could be better. "This is the third time this week that you've taken the wrong exit," he barked, not even looking at Michael. His tone was dismissive, as if his employee's mistake was the worst thing in the world. Michael took a deep breath, trying to keep his calm. He had learned to tolerate the CEO's criticisms over the years. However, his patience was beginning to thin. He wasn't just upset about being insulted again, but about the way he was being treated as if he didn't matter at all. Michael had worked hard for years, always doing his job with dedication and precision. But no matter how hard he tried, it was never enough. The CEO never saw him as more than a driver, a servant to his needs. The irony was not lost on Michael. Despite all the wealth and success the CEO had, he was still someone who lived in constant fear of losing control, of being seen as weak or vulnerable. The CEO had built his empire on the backs of people like Michael, but he had never once stopped to think about the emotional toll it took on them. At that moment, Michael realized something. This was the way it was always going to be. The CEO would never change. He would always be an arrogant, untouchable figure who looked down on those beneath him, or so he thought. What the CEO didn't know was that this was about to change. A simple moment, an act of humility from Michael, would soon shatter the CEO's world and force him to confront his own arrogance. It would be a turning point in their relationship, one that neither of them would ever forget. In life, things can change in an instant. One moment, everything is running smoothly. The next, an unexpected crisis threatens everything. This is exactly what happened when the CEO found himself in the midst of a high-stakes business event that quickly spiraled out of control. It was a turning point, a moment that would ultimately reveal the true value of the people he had so often overlooked, including Michael, his loyal driver. It was a prestigious business summit that had taken months to prepare for, with the CEO at the helm of one of the keynote addresses. As the meeting progressed, the atmosphere in the room was tense, as investors and industry leaders looked to the CEO for insights into the future of his company. But the pressure was mounting, and the CEO, already frazzled from the constant demands of the event, was on edge. While he stood at the podium, speaking confidently to the crowd, things took a dramatic turn. His phone buzzed on the desk next to him, an urgent notification that no one in the room could have anticipated. The company was being targeted by an aggressive competitor, one who had managed to manipulate financial data to cast doubt on the integrity of the CEO's business practices. The news hit the CEO like a ton of bricks. His heart raced, his hands trembled, and for the first time in years, he felt completely powerless. What ensued was a chaotic scramble to mitigate the damage. The CEO's team rushed to contain the situation, but the public relations nightmare seemed unavoidable. In his panic, the CEO made a series of missteps, further alienating the media and key stakeholders. His empire, built on years of hard work, was now teetering on the edge of collapse. As the crisis deepened, the CEO was escorted to his car, his mind racing with thoughts of how to salvage his reputation. That's when Michael, the driver, found himself at the center of the unfolding drama. Michael, who had always been invisible to the CEO, now saw an opportunity to step forward. As the CEO climbed into the car, still reeling from the events at the summit, he slammed the door shut behind him. "Michael, get me out of here now! This is a disaster!" the CEO shouted, his voice laced with desperation. Michael didn't respond immediately. Instead, he started the engine and drove in silence. The CEO was pacing in the back seat, too agitated to sit still. It was clear that he had no idea what to do next. He was overwhelmed by the weight of the situation. Michael, on the other hand, had been in the business long enough to recognize when someone was drowning in their own stress. It was in this moment of crisis that Michael's calm and composed demeanor would make all the difference. As they drove through the city streets, Michael took a sharp turn, heading in the opposite direction of where the CEO thought they were going. The CEO snapped, frustration bubbling over. "Where are you taking me, Michael? I need to go to my office right now." But Michael remained unfazed. He continued to drive quietly until the CEO, in his frantic state, finally realized they were heading somewhere else. "I need to talk to my investors," the CEO muttered. Michael finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "I know a place," he said, his eyes focused on the road. "I know you don't trust me, but there's something I've learned over the years, and I think it's time you hear it." The CEO, still on edge, grew more puzzled. What was this driver, this man he had so often belittled, going to say that could possibly help? But he was too distracted by the chaos of the moment to argue. He just needed a solution, anything to stop the panic that was consuming him. Michael pulled into a quiet part of the city, far from the looming pressure of his office or the public eye. The area was tranquil, almost serene. He stopped the car in front of a small cafe, one Michael had often visited during his off hours. "Let's sit for a minute," Michael said. The CEO was taken aback. This was not what he had expected, not what he had demanded. But as he followed Michael into the cafe, he realized that perhaps for the first time, he had to listen to someone who had always been dismissed by him. Michael guided him to a small corner table, away from the noise of the world. The CEO sat down, still in disbelief at how far his world had fallen in such a short amount of time. "You think I don't understand the pressure you're under," Michael began, "but I've been in your shoes. You've been so focused on the world you've built that you forgot something important. The people who helped you get there. When everything goes wrong, you can't do it alone. You need the right people by your side." For a moment, the CEO was silent. His mind raced, but Michael's words struck a chord. It had never occurred to him that someone like Michael, someone so far removed from his world, could have such insight. Michael had been the one constant in his life, the one person who never asked for anything in return, never sought recognition. As the CEO sat there, listening to Michael's calm advice, something inside him began to shift. It wasn't just about solving the immediate crisis. It was about re-evaluating everything he had taken for granted. His employees, his relationships, his priorities. "I've been an idiot," the CEO muttered under his breath. "I've treated you like nothing, Michael." Michael simply nodded. "It's never too late to change." This conversation, in the midst of the crisis, would become the catalyst for the CEO's transformation. For the first time, he began to see the value in those he had once considered beneath him. Michael's calm wisdom, combined with his loyalty, had given the CEO a new perspective on leadership, one that wasn't solely about control, but about understanding and compassion. 3. Redemption and transformation. The CEO's unexpected change. The next chapter of this story is one of change, real change that would alter not only the CEO's relationship with Michael, but also his approach to leadership. The crisis had been a wake-up call, and the lessons learned on that day would go on to shape the rest of the CEO's life. Let me know when you're ready for this last part, and I'll finish the story. The day after the crisis, the CEO returned to his office, but something had shifted within him. He was no longer the same man who had arrogantly dismissed everyone around him. Michael's simple act of wisdom and the calm, collected way he had handled the situation had opened his eyes to the flaws he had never seen in himself before. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and he could now see the world and his company through a completely different lens. Over the next few days, the CEO began to make subtle yet profound changes in how he interacted with his employees. The shift wasn't dramatic at first, but the people who worked around him began to notice. He began arriving early at the office, not to take control, but to meet with his team and ask how they were doing. He started attending meetings with his employees, sitting down with them on equal footing rather than from his towering position at the head of the table. "What do you think about this?" he would ask, genuinely curious about their opinions. It was a small change, but to those who had always worked under him, it was like night and day. But the most significant transformation occurred in his relationship with Michael. No longer just a driver, Michael was now recognized for his value. The CEO asked Michael to join him for lunch one afternoon, something that would have been unthinkable just a few weeks earlier. Over that meal, the CEO began to apologize for the way he had treated him over the years. "I never truly saw you, Michael. All this time, I've been so wrapped up in my own world that I never noticed the people who helped me get here," the CEO confessed. "You're not just a driver, you're a vital part of my life and my success." Michael, ever humble, simply smiled and nodded. "I never expected anything, sir. I just did my job." But in that moment, the CEO realized something even more profound. People like Michael weren't just there to serve. They were part of the bigger picture. Michael, with his loyalty and integrity, had shown him that leadership wasn't about command and control. It was about trust, respect, and recognizing the value in others, regardless of their position. The CEO's newfound humility also led him to start mentoring other employees, giving them opportunities to shine, just as Michael had done. He implemented new company policies that valued each employee's contributions, making sure that no one felt invisible or overlooked again. The change wasn't just personal, it became company-wide. As a result, the culture at the company shifted from one of fear and hierarchy to one of collaboration and mutual respect. Employees felt heard, and productivity soared. But perhaps the most symbolic moment of transformation came during a company-wide meeting, months after the crisis. The CEO stood before his employees, who were now all looking at him with newfound respect. He spoke openly about the journey he had been on, acknowledging his past mistakes and how they had shaped his growth as a leader. "I used to think that being in charge meant controlling everything and everyone," he said. "But I've learned that leadership is about empowering those around you, recognizing their worth, and most importantly, treating them with kindness and respect." Michael showed me that. The room was silent for a moment, but then, one by one, the employees stood up and applauded. It was a moment of collective recognition, not just for the CEO's change, but for the transformation of the entire company culture. It was a new beginning for everyone involved. Michael, of course, remained the humble man he had always been, but the CEO made sure to acknowledge his role in the company's success. Michael was promoted to a managerial position, overseeing a team of drivers and logistics personnel. His leadership style was rooted in the same values he had demonstrated during the crisis: calm, integrity, and respect for others. Under his guidance, the team flourished, and Michael became a symbol of the kind of leadership that the CEO now championed. The story of the arrogant CEO and his humble driver was now a story of redemption, a story of how a simple gesture, an act of kindness and wisdom, could lead to profound change. The CEO had learned that no one, no matter their title or position, was insignificant. Michael had been the catalyst for this change, and the CEO would forever be grateful for the day his driver showed him what true leadership meant. And so, their relationship grew, from one of employer and employee to one of mutual respect and admiration. The CEO never again took for granted the people around him, realizing that every individual had a role to play in the success of the whole. His transformation as a leader was a testament to the power of humility and the importance of recognizing the humanity in those who work for us. In the end, the CEO learned the most important lesson of all. Leadership is not about power or control. It's about understanding, respect, and the willingness to change when we see the value in others.